Life is hectic, demanding, and doesn't stop. When honest with ourselves, we must confess we often don't know what the hell we're doing. The Larkcast is an ongoing conversation about the inclusive and mischievous nature of God's presence through the lens of all the things that make up this phenomenon we refer to as life. Astonishing grace and refreshing honesty collide right here for your weekly encouragement.
3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the Larkcast. My name's Tony, and with me is Russ with the freaking dopest Ebor hat I've ever seen. I like that one, dude. That's good.
I appreciate it, man. You know what? I was going to save this until I saw you, but give me just a moment here. Give me just a quick set.
Well, I just got a flash of Russ's love handle there.
Oh, man, you can edit that part out. I try to keep this camera angle, on my fit parts. But
all right, let's see what you got.
You ready, dude?
Mm-hmm.
Little flat bill action gift for my friend Tony.
Damn, dude.
Look
Got
at
that
that
orange
colors
on that yellow. Man, I love that thing.
Yeah.
Dude, sweet.
Yep. I had to Post Malone my style up a little bit here, man.
Yeah, that is the style right now.
A little more trucker, but
well, the trucker fits you well. The trucker is definitely the trend right now. I like the more lower profile, unformed. I'm still rocking with that, but I like that. I like that a lot. Can you ship that to me ASAP?
I thought, I wanted to show it to you and then just see how much you would pay to have it shipped. I'm just kidding. Oh man, but
it was like $8.
Welcome to the Larkcast.
Yeah, welcome back to the Larkcast.
Yeah, man, it's been a couple weeks. It's been a season, man. It has. I just I don't have another word for it than that. It has been a season, bro.
Life's
Health
been
issues.
beating you up.
Yeah. House issues.
You're in round 10.
Round 10.
Round 10.
Yeah, I got last night I was able to get some of the water damage to our dining room. I was able to get all that buttoned up and mudded. And I woke up this morning and spotted a leak in the wall from my kitchen sink. It's coming through.
It's like Bob Vila in This Old House, but it's just a dude who barely knows anything about construction, just pissed. And trying to figure out how to fix it all.
Yeah, just doing it all
with no money and no camera crew.
Right. Yeah.
That's a YouTube channel.
It probably could be. It's it has been a season.
That's for sure a YouTube channel.
But yeah, man, just all that kind of going on while you're also trying to work and hang out with neighbors and pass on good news, and right, you've got a family, and but all that said, man, it's good to be on here. It's good to see you, dude, and I'm excited about this topic, man.
Yeah, we're gonna be in Acts chapter 10, focusing on our good friend Peter. My friend Peter, which is an old Alkaline Trio song, by the way. If you guys are into, Chicago punk rock, look up the song My Friend Peter. It's great. Our friend Peter. And he has an interaction, a pretty remarkable interaction, with a dude named Cornelius, who was a Roman soldier of the Italian cohort. So he's a paisano, he's got his wife beater, his slacks, and his suspenders, little chest hair coming out, little gold chain.
Got that horn. What is that Italian horn hanging from the necklace?
Yeah, man. Yeah. all of it.
I
Um,
like this. I love beginning podcast with stereotypes.
well, I feel like I can kind of, I feel a little free here, since my last name's Sicilian and I have a number of Italian uh people and pieces in my story. So,
Oh, for sure.
but yeah, it is funny like watching like the Sopranos like came under fire recently because they're talking about like adding, oh no, it was well Goodfellas and the Sopranos. So now people are like all up in arms and they want to add these like warnings of these old shows that they contain
Oh,
like
dude.
stereotypes and like all this other stuff. It's like, dude,
Yeah.
everybody loves it. Just
Leave it
shut
alone.
up.
Yeah. And in the
Um,
words of like Dave Chappelle, stereotypes are funny because they're
because they're
true.
true. Yes.
And if we all could just have the humility that produces the levity to actually connect with each other and laugh about these things, right?
Hmm.
There's actually some beauty in that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. We were all having fun, joking with each other about these stereotypes and, you know, having lots of laughs um, before. Yeah. Before.
yeah,
But
before.
um, so Peter, a disciple of Jesus, walked with Jesus, had breakfast with the resurrected Jesus. Now after his ascension has kind of found, himself traveling and left with a mission to really pass on the good news of the resurrected Lord of all, um, who's done something amazing on behalf of all of humanity, um, to forgive and to unite the world to himself, that our
Mm,
brokenness, our sinfulness, our silliness, all the things that we hate about ourselves and the things that we can't fix about ourselves, even though we're so obsessed about it. God has said none of that is a barrier to me having a relationship with you because I made you and reconciled you to myself in my son. And so Peter's like, man, I have this task, this mission, this sort of identity over my life to pass this on. But Peter still is very, very much rooted in these like old just
yep.
habits and ways of thinking that are rooted in his Jewishness before meeting Jesus. And so that even though Jesus constantly shared parables, said, I need to go and I need to die and I'm going to rise again, that this is about forgiveness, that this is about inclusion, that this is about reconciling, he still is hanging on to these um, Jewish habits, ideas, ways that he's viewing people, who's in,
Yeah.
who's out, who is this for, who's it not for, what's what does it take for you to like really truly belong to this thing, this Jesus. He still has a lot of that still in him. And so in Acts 10 we have two separate people. We have this Cornelius, who's a pretty connected dude. Like, and I don't mean connected like that, like he's connected, like he's a friend of ours. I don't mean it like in the Donnie Brasco friend of ours kind of way. But you'll see in a little bit if you go in. We're not gonna like read the chapter or anything, but feel free, please go read it. It's phenomenal. Um, and so we're talking about the days before social media. So this is like first century,
Hmm.
before cell phones. Um, and so Jesus really wants these two dudes to connect. And so they each separately have dreams and visions about each other. So it starts with Cornelius. He's like, there's a dude named Peter. He's in this city. Send some people to go find him. Tell him, come to your house. In the same way, Peter is hanging out with this like leather tanner or something like that, like some
Yeah, dude.
vocation that doesn't even exist anymore. It's like a what's the bootmaker shoe dude? What's that one? What's that old
Cobbler.
book? A cobbler. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
like
that would
it's
be a
even older
killer
than
trade,
that.
man. Yeah,
It's even
I would be.
older
I
than
would be
that.
a cobbler, bro, if I could.
Yeah. So he has a dream and a vision too to go over to this, to go meet up with this guy. What's interesting is like, so first of all, Cornelius, he's not Jewish, he's a Gentile. He's some other race other than what Peter is and formerly thought of as like the only lane and the only people that God deals with. And now this news is spreading to non-Jewish people. And Paul's been primarily at the head of a lot of that kind of movement. But it seems like this is Peter's first interaction and experience with the gospel actually getting to people that aren't exactly like him.
Yeah. And what's unique about that, in my opinion, is it actually zeroes in on Peter, on the gospel getting to Peter,
To Peter. Yes. Yep.
which is someone that you
Which
would
is,
say, no, 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 this is a dude who's
oh,
been with Jesus, right?
he
This is
gets
a
it. He's
gets it. I
been,
mean,
dude, he's been transformed by the gospel.
yeah.
It's gotten through to every part of his thinking and being and doing.
I mean, out of all the disciples, right, this would be probably the most prominent, the most known, the most, right,
Mm-hmm.
forward running individual. And yet in the story, from what I heard in the church world, man, it was all about seeing these things so that you can, right? You know, become this person who's going to fix these people, blah, blah, blah. But we forget that, dang, no, this is actually illustrating a much deeper thing within Peter's life,
Mm-hmm.
which to me is what makes it so relevant to all of us, right where we sit, no matter who
Yeah,
we are today.
totally.
So you have
And
the
it's
whole book of
like,
Acts is, oops, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just saying, like the whole book's like the book is ultimately about expansion. It's about movement. It's a picture of the Spirit of God on move and what's happening. It starts in this little town of Jerusalem, right? But it ends in Rome, this epicenter of right culture. And as I look at this story and I look at the book, man, like there's this thing that's like, man, this is a book that's capturing a movement that goes beyond preconceived ideas. It's going beyond the borders that we've set. Okay, not just socially, but even personally.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost like it's a story that's pointing to like what happens in a person, the expansion that happens in a person when new longings don't fit inside old frameworks.
Hmm.
And everybody and just to be clear, like we all have frameworks. We all have these ideas of who God is and what faith is and what right who I am and who my neighbor is and what the rest of the world is and what church is and what discipleship is. And you kind of go down this list. And so we have these frameworks, but dude, if we've seen anything over the last what 5, 6 years, man, is an explosion of the nuns, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know who Barbara Bass calls like the fastest growing spiritual group in the country are spiritual nuns,
Mm-hmm.
quotation marks, people who do not affiliate, people who are, I know
They're
there's
not
a
checking the
God.
classic boxes.
Yeah. And that number is supposed to increase to outnumber but believers in the US by 2040. I mean, you're talking like a major shift of the landscape in America.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my point. For a lot of people, like, yeah, there can be some really crazy ideas within all that. I get that. And some very destructive ideas, even. But there's also a vast movement of people, millions of people, man, that the Spirit is doing something in them where they have gone through these new longings that don't fit inside the old frameworks that they were handed. Frameworks around God and faith and church that they didn't work. They never actually led to freedom.
Mm-hmm.
They never led to the way of friendship.
Yeah, and they're
They never led
seeing,
to rest and relief.
yeah, and for as much as the communities that they were a part of, pounded this idea of like this is biblical, they're
Right.
finding that a lot of the rhythms and the things that they were doing there aren't actually in the scriptures. It's more, of a cultural, or a subcultural thing.
Yeah. Which goes right into what you were just about to unpack about Peter, the vision that he's handed. It he is who you just described. He's someone who's grabbed onto something and holding it up and calling it biblical.
Mm-hmm.
And God's going, yeah, that's actually not true. It's
Yeah, and
like,
I think
what, bro?
Yeah, and I think once he gets to Cornelius's house and shares everything about, Jesus, who's Lord of all, who's risen, and who shows no partiality, whose forgiveness is
Hmm.
for all, I think he knew that. Like if you gave him a test, like a 5-question quiz,
Yep.
about the expansiveness of God's love, the inclusion of the gospel to all peoples, right? How insane this forgiveness is, like to really,
Yeah.
truly, truly forgive, pardon,
Mhm.
erase, remove, you know, anything we've done or keep doing or have not done. I think he would pass that quiz. But from a personal standpoint, he's never really like entered these spaces to have conversations with these people, to be
Mm-mm.
present among them. And so Jesus is continuing his mission to like undo this in
Yeah.
Peter, while also simultaneously having this cool thing he's doing with Cornelius and his entire household and crew that's connected, to
Yeah.
him. And so Peter still is very much like in this mindset of like, I can't eat these certain foods because they're unclean, they're unholy, and I can't associate with these certain people because they are unclean and unholy.
Right.
And so literally, dude, the communication from the angel of the Lord to Cornelius was very easy. One word, one direction. Dude jumped on it and just straight up did it. With Peter, it took 3 different and separate visions
Yeah.
and direct communications from the Lord himself with meat falling from the sky, a meat of all the meats, dude,
Yep.
all the meats, right? Um,
Like an
that
Italian butcher shop that you walk into
yes,
and you're just like, I think I might have died and gone to heaven.
yep,
That's what I
all
would
the
say. But
meats.
for Peter, it's like, I can't be here. I can't
I
partake in
can't
these
eat
things.
this. It's unclean. I can't,
Right.
all that. And then you add on top of it with Cornelius, he's a soldier. I mean, if you know Peter's interaction with Roman soldiers, like it's not, you know, it's a complicated past. At one point he pulled a sword out and lopped a dude's ear off because they were trying to arrest his buddy.
Yeah.
So Peter's got this thing with Roman soldiers and especially a Jewish person. Rome was the known power of the world at the time, oppressed and suppressed his people and, conquered their land and all that. So that Roman soldier piece is kind of complicated for Peter too. And so he's got like 3 different times meat falling from the sky and just telling him, rise, Peter, kill and eat. Like it's okay. It's okay to kill and it's okay to
To eat these
fire up the
things.
grill and to fire up the smoker
Yeah.
and eat these things. So Cornelius's crew sends these people to the city where he's at. Joppa is, I think, what it is.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, we're here for Peter. Does anybody here go by that name? And he's like, yep, it's me. And goes, hey, the Lord gave us a vision, told us to, seek you out. He goes, yep, it's me. And Peter's like, he's not even voluntarily or willfully on his own doing this thing. It's not like he's like, you know what, man, I need to get better at this. This is not a personal project for Peter where he's
Yeah.
growing in, his missional fruitfulness. He's literally just getting swept up in something that Jesus is doing, forcing, pushing the envelope in his life. And so he goes with these guys back to Cornelius's house. And Cornelius at this point is so excited about what's going on that he's invited literally everybody he knows.
Yeah. It's a
Everybody
party.
he knows. The
A
in
big
Acts,
unbelieving Gentile party, dude, going on at
yep,
Cornelius's house.
with all the meats, dude,
Yeah,
all the meats
with
and all the vino.
smoked pork butt, man, chopped up, dude, ready to go.
Yep, all of it.
Now,
And
here's a funny thing: before you go too far down that lane, as you were talking about with Peter, right? Like he goes up on the roof, and right, he goes. The word in Acts 10 says he goes into like this trance where he
Mhm,
sees this vision, right? That you were just unpacking there. And the word in the Greek there is ecstasis.
mhm,
Okay. That's the word that's used for trance. And I wrote this down. Ek means out of. Okay.
mhm,
Just in doing a little digging. Stasis is like standing or state. It's literally where we get our word for ecstasy from.
mhm,
That's where it comes from. And so to the trance that's described here, this ecstasy is when you are out of your normal position, your normal base. You are literally in a place right now and in this moment where you are standing outside of anything you have known before. That's what Peter has going on.
mhm,
And dude, that seems to be something significant here, I feel like, for us to look at. Because as the story goes, God has to bring this about for Peter. And as you said, it happens three times. But the reason why it happens three times is because Peter argues with God
mhm,
three times. Right. So for everybody listening in, please hear this. Peter, okay, has to be brought into a trance, brought into a state of ecstasy. Oftentimes it's associated with like crazy happiness, right? Or joy, but it can also be like in its root meaning, it can be something that's caused from anxiety, okay, or pain. It's not what we've often turned the word into, is actually not, doesn't fully cover its original, right, base.
mhm,
And this has to happen because of how stuck Peter is in his religious framework.
mhm,
And here's what I mean. Peter, in that moment on the roof, in this vision three times, is a picture of a guy who is so committed to his religion that he argues with the God of his religion about what can be and what really is and
mhm.
what he's been invited into all along.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yep.
To be so committed to your religion, to the framework that you know, that you argue with the God of your religion. And I get why that's difficult because humans have a very long history of defining themselves through what we do.
Mm,
Okay. I'm not above this, just to be clear. I've struggled with this like everybody else. But we often seem to find it very easy to define ourselves, especially against others. And that's something that Peter has done his whole life, man. And that's what makes this so difficult. I don't think that Peter, and I'm just trying to be clear here for him, but also for you, for me, and for everybody who's listening to this. This isn't like a shame on you, right? You're a POS, move on. You know what I mean? This shouldn't be the case. It's actually like God just being gracious with Peter the same
mhm,
way he's gracious with us because he seems to know how our minds work. Okay. It's very important to note like how the mind works. Our minds from the beginning of man have been trained to spot the abnormal, to spot danger, right? The reason why I know this to be true is because you and I are talking about it right now. The reason why I know it's true for our audience is they're listening to this right now. In other words, if your mind didn't do its job, then you would not have been able to spot danger where it is and to steer clear of it, to stay alive. This is a big chunk of how our minds work. The problem that we face, or that Peter faced, is we live in a culture that lives in its head. And so we sometimes, from my experience, we fail to understand the heart and how it fits into all this. And so when the mind's doing its job, it's like bringing data to you, right? It's bringing what you need to see things clearly, to spot dangers, right? But if all you do is live out of that, you wind up living in a framework that you're calling faithfulness to God that's actually faithless. And you're fiercely committed to it.
Mm-hmm. With lots of good reason,
But lots of good reason.
even biblical reasons to stay where you are.
Yeah. So think about like where the what the heart does is the heart can actually grab a hold of what the mind is bringing into this playing field, and the heart sort of grabs onto what all the mind's gathering there, but then can sort of help us start to step into what the Spirit's doing. So the Spirit of God has been doing something, and Peter's missing out on it in the name of faithfulness. That's
Mm-hmm.
faithless. And so God has to like literally bring about a trance to help him step outside of his normal state of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Again, because the mind is good and it plays a key role. But what the Spirit's doing is taking you somewhere. There's an expansion that's going somewhere. There's a longing that you have that doesn't fit in the old frameworks.
Right. And this is where I think like the word deconstruction has like, dude, like, some people
Yes.
embrace it as like, yeah, man, like, I deconstructed and, how's your deconstruction going? Or, hey, let's pursue deconstruction. And then like, the camp that's, still the, institution and is trying to like keep everything together, they're going to look down upon that or view that in a negative, sense. But in a lot of ways, this is what's happening. Like, I love how that breakdown of that word, because once you start to question the things that were so important to your entire identity and your entire way of living, it's almost like you're out of your normal stance.
Yeah.
Once I started to see the inability of these programs and Sunday rhythms and insular community as it related to truly getting good news or getting people who had never even considered this even around a conversation with the people who did know it. Once I stopped believing in like that delivery system of good news to people,
Mm-hmm.
I like that was like one little nugget that took me out of my stance. It took me out of my base. And then there was a number of things after that. So literally, it's like the floor was pulled out from underneath him, or the rug was pulled out, from underneath him. He was outside of that which was comfortable. But if you know
Yeah.
anything about the way God works, like that's how it happens, dude. It's how it happens.
Oh,
Nobody comes into any of these realizations without a crisis.
yeah.
It's the beginning point of every single parable that Jesus tells. There's a crisis. There's a thing that's causing like panic. It's not as it should be. There's a decision to be made. There's something that you have to face. Um, and so this is Peter's crisis. At this
Yeah.
point,
This
he's been through a
ecstasy,
number of them.
yeah, it exposes, right? It exposes the assumptions that he's held. It exposes the beliefs that he's held. It exposes that so much of this was man-made.
Mm-hmm.
Also exposes that, yeah, there were things that God was saying and doing that brought you to a point of seeing who the Messiah is. That's the reason for a lot of these rituals. But now through him, the Spirit of God lives and dwells within all to see and hear and to move into new ways of being, right? And you're right, man. Like that's kind of what's happening here, and it's a crisis that brings it about. And I just want to say this really quickly. I think the reason why that's so hard for us, okay, I'll just say this. Like you said, it takes a crisis, is because think about how you got a hold of the framework that you've had your whole life. Think about that. I
It
can
was just
almost
handed
bet
to
that it,
me.
yeah, but it's probably handed to you by people who have loved you well,
Sure.
people who have fed you, people who have clothed you, people who have cared for you,
Hmm.
right? Came to you and they came with a framework that they had. And so you've grabbed onto that. And now the Spirit of God is doing something and saying something that's pushing you outside. There's an expansion movement. Again, back to the book of Acts. There's something that's going on in you that's now wanting to express itself outside of you and beyond you. But it's very difficult. One, again, because of how your mind works, but also just because of how it latches onto something. I think a lot of times we don't understand that gratefulness and dissatisfaction can live side by side. You can be grateful for the people who have loved you well and handed you a framework, and simultaneously be dissatisfied with what that framework has brought about in your life. That's allowing you in this state of ecstasy, like Peter,
Hmm.
to see that, yeah, this thing actually doesn't lead to the freedom that Jesus gave. This faithfulness that I've known is actually faithless. And there's something much more beautiful that the Lord is inviting me into.
Yeah. Well, and that's was the next point that I was going to bring up is like, it's Jesus himself that's pushing the issue with him.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yep.
And so I think it's a wonderful way to look at it, like that whole like out of your base, out of your original stance, everything that you thought you were so sure of is now like you can't stand on it, anymore. It's being toppled, it's being removed.
Yep.
And so into this unknown, scary like thing, which is literally just a party. It's literally just a party. But for Peter, it's wrapped up in so much, more.
Yeah.
It's the people that you're associated with, the things we're eating and drinking. And at one point in his life, well, really up until this moment, he was like, that's wrong. I can't do that.
Yeah.
There's all these things in my past and like the scriptures that are forbidding me, to do this. But Jesus is like, no, man, he's pushing him out. So he goes.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not like against his will. He's not like getting kidnapped,
No, he comes down from the roof, right, from his trance, and he's like, "All right, let's roll."
but he's getting wrapped up in it. And he's like, all right, here we go. I guess we're doing this. And he shows up to this party and they welcome him in like a crazy way. Like Cornelius drops down and like just honors him.
Hmm.
And Peter's like, man, stand up. I'm just a dude. Um, and the first words out of his mouth, this is how he kicks off his greeting to this crew.
Not exactly what you're trained to do in any sort of public speaking class.
His very first words are,
Peter, you want to open our conference for us?
as a Jew, I shouldn't even be here hanging out with you people. Is basically what it is.
Oh man, it's so funny.
I shouldn't even be here. I'm not even
Shouldn't even be
allowed to
here.
be here.
Yeah, he's still wrestling, but here's the beauty, man. Even in his still wrestling and just absolutely blowing it in his opening line and how he's trying to connect with this audience, he still crosses the threshold, man.
He does.
He's there's a movement that is taking that in place in him from the Spirit of God that has now moved him beyond himself into a new way of seeing God, into a new way of seeing himself, into a new way of seeing others, into a new way of understanding the gospel, God's grace, right, and forgiveness, a new way into understanding what faith is, and even what community is. Because this isn't a dude who's right finding his constant weekly connection and support and support group from the synagogue anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's done. That's over.
Mm-hmm.
He's now building a whole new base of friendship with unbelievers at this moment. Like there's just such a cool thing, man. Like talk about going on a lark, bro.
Yep.
Right? Like talk about the adventure, the spontaneous way of friendship that you see in Jesus. You now see in this scene.
Yep.
But you're right. I guess
But it's
but
not a
he's
fun
still
thing for
not
Peter.
fully
This
getting
is,
it, but yet he's stepping into it. I guess is my point.
yeah, he's going, and maybe and again, like Jesus is pushing the issue, and so he's going willfully, but he's full of fear, and he's not necessarily like of clean conscience in doing it either.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's a lot of this that's messing with Peter's conscience as this is happening, to the point where it's the first words he says. This first statement is literally a confession of his conscience being violated. So think
Yep.
about that.
Yeah.
So a lot of us think like, okay, well, the spirit's supposed to convict me of my sin, like all the bad stuff, right? Well, dude, the spirit here is convicting Peter of his supposed good, his good
Yes.
convictions,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so, dude, like when you get into this out of your base, this sort of deconstruction, this sort of push outside of everything that you know and that's comfortable, dude, like it's a wild ride. I went through it, and it's like you feel like your conscience is being violated. It
Yes.
feels wrong. It feels bad because
Yep.
everything in your former community and like that whole world is telling you something completely different, but it's Jesus himself.
Yeah. It's back to your mind and how the mind works. The mind is telling you that this is dangerous. This is going to lead to your demise.
Yep.
And I think oftentimes what we do is we associate that with the Spirit of God.
Mhm.
And so we go back. We go back to what we know. We go back to doing what we've always done.
Mhm.
We stay put in the framework that we were handed that never actually led to freedom, but that was probably our fault. And so we need to, fill in the blank.
Mhm.
But again, like gratefulness for the people who have loved you and you handed that to you can coexist alongside of restlessness that allows your mind to start to go, hold on. Yes, mind work, please collect the data. But based off what my heart is saying in this, in accordance to what's actually written versus what I was told is written,
Mhm.
this might feel very unnerving or even wrong,
Mhm.
but it's not because Jesus is saying that.
Yeah.
That's actually my psychosis speaking. That's my
Yeah.
FOMO faith
Mhm.
at work. Not the
Mhm.
faith from Jesus, but my FOMO faith, because the faith that Jesus gives us, it doesn't lead to FOMO.
Yeah. Um, man,
There's
this is
something
so
beautiful about that, man.
it is. It's so good. And maybe you've gone through it, and we'd love to like hear your
Hmm.
stories of it. I remember having a very similar thing. And I didn't know anybody who knew anyone really outside of, the church that I was leading. I was so insular. I was in a bubble, man. But I knew one couple, and they were connected to like the punk rock tattoo scene and like here locally, and like they were coming and they were like good friends. Like one of those like people that come to your church are like a breath of fresh air. You're like, oh man, like you remind me of like, all the
Me,
good things I love. And and
I know you won't be here long, so can we become friends really quick?
I just remember being like, can I come hang out? Like at your house? Can I be invited to your house? Can I please come? And dude, even though like that's how like I kind of started in this whole thing, the only reason I even jumped into being a pastor was someone told me like, dude, if you really want to pass on, the good news of Jesus, this is the pathway to do it. This is do it.
Hmm.
Like, and they were trying to get me to go to seminary and like all this other stuff. And I seriously thought about it for a minute, didn't do it. but like, come on staff, be a pastor, lead these gatherings, lead these Sunday things. And then you come to find out, man, the people who I really have a heart for, they're not coming to this. They're not
Yeah.
interested in this at all. This isn't even how they learn or talk or converse or even entertain ideas. It's not even a place for them to even share their doubts or unbeliefs or even push back. It's a one-way conversation. The primary communicative tool is a one-way conversation known as a sermon. And I was just like, dude, I just started to like all these holes started to get poked into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to my very first like party at their house. And I imagine that Peter felt a lot like I felt that day. And I almost didn't even know how to function or even act outside of just having this specific title in the specific community. I was just an everyday person. I was just a dude that was there that needed to converse. People weren't lining up to talk to me. They didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, oh man, like it was just so foreign, you know, like I just need to like introduce myself to this person. And like, what's your name? Who are you? You know, like I forgot even how to be a friend, dude, a normal person. I
Yeah.
forgot even how to be a normal person. And
It's
so, yeah.
it's cool how like the 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 spirit for you was at work in your love for other people, finding relief instead of religion is sort of let helped you get outside of your normal state, outside of the mind. It was almost like that was the ecstasy, man, that then led to the rethinking of who Jesus and is and what faith is and what the church is.
And where he
Uh,
is and who he's for.
yeah, yeah, very similar. I'm saying to Peter, just in a different way. His was more
Mhm.
about preserving himself in the right religion. Yours was about trying to see others come alive to a religion that you knew. But again, like there was just this beauty of mind and heart and how the spirit works, man, that helped you cross that threshold. Like, I don't know where this is going. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know it's of the Lord. And I know that I have to step into this new thing
Mhm.
because this is what movement happens. Inner movement takes you beyond yourself.
Yep.
And it's just cool to see that. It was similar for me. I remember my big aha, man, that got me started on this road was when I first moved to Chicago to plant. And I'm meeting all these neighbors and hanging out. Right, it's kind of cool, like what was happening. But I remember, like in all those early conversations, I would drop quotes. You know what I mean? Or I would drop like, like, hey, man, I was in this meeting, with Bill Hybels, and they're like, who's Bill Hybels? And I'm like, Bill Hybels is like the pastor of the biggest church in America, Willow Creek. It's right outside of Chicago, right here. Dude, every neighbor I had was like, yeah, I don't know who the hell that is. And then I would say something like Jane McDonald. These are all like, I guess, guys that have kind of gone off the radar since then. But
Yes, they have. You just named two dudes that are
but
like
then like mention
done
him
for.
again, right? This
But
major
they were the
popular,
names. Yeah.
yeah, major popular guy in Christendom. And my neighbor's like, who's that? And why do I give a shit? I was like, none of them had a clue about these uber famous pastors and these big
Yeah.
mega churches that were right there.
Right there.
Not a single one of them had a clue. Not a single one of them cared. And then I was like, hey, Francis Chan's coming to do this thing. And my one neighbor was like, who the is Francis Chan? And why the beep do I care? And then I was like, all right.
He
And then we
was
kept
definitely of the
talking.
Italian Roman cohort, that guy.
Yeah. And I was like, well, what about dinner, man? Yeah. Love to have dinner with you guys.
Love it.
And it was this thing in me where I'm like, dude, the framework that I was handed was this is the way to do it and this is how it works. And then there's all these connections that you'll find around these bigger names. And dude, you actually get out among like the real world and you care less. You could absolutely care less. And so I'm just saying, like in a different way, that was sort of for me this like moment of ecstasy where all of a sudden I was outside of my normal state of being,
Yeah.
knowing like what I've been handed is of no value and where the spirit is leading me to go.
Mhm.
And and of course there's a zillion things that were unfolded from there, right?
Yeah.
But
And
I'm just saying
I
there's a
need to,
starting point. That's
yeah.
all.
And I need to make this point because one of the biggest frustrating things that I'm seeing right now is like all the churches around me. And I don't know, and I only know this because like I'll see people like post things, and I still live in the same, region and general city, like where I pastored and stuff. So you see people like post things or quotes or like what they like or share or whatever. And it's literally just a message of transformation. It's like, yeah, there's a faith and a belief, but then there's like something that leads to you being truly transformed.
Yeah.
And like true, genuine faith is like this transformation, this moment where you just like go from being a dipshit to like,
A
the most
disciple.
spirit, yeah, dipshit to a disciple, you know? And it's like, dude, you're like transformed and like, cool, man. Like this turning point, happened. And I'm not saying
Mm,
that there's not like turning points, and I'm not discounting that because a lot of that stuff is like real genuine and it's good and it's all that. But
it's
man,
just
for a
not
lot
what
of
we
people,
think.
it doesn't happen like that. Or for people like Peter, dude, it's literally like a thing that happens over a really long period of time.
Yeah.
And it's not even you being faithful and like, man, I need to work this out. I need to start working on this. It's literally a movement of Jesus, a continual one in
Yeah.
his life. And so this is the movement of him, not the faithfulness or the resolve or even the maturity of a disciple moving forward. It's literally God doing this in his life.
Yeah. Yeah. If your Christianity is about your transformation and any work that you play in it, then I would say you probably missed what Christianity is. And sadly, that transformation is no transformation at all because
Mm-hmm.
the work is placed on you
Yep.
and
So you're doing a lot of things
it'll rob you.
you're trying to maintain you're trying to maintain your status as a citizen of the kingdom. You're trying to maintain your, you're a card carrying fruitful disciple and
Hmm.
not a dipshit. And it's, man, and I just look at just the beauty of this. Like here's a dude who literally heard all the parables, saw all the stuff, ate breakfast with the risen Jesus, and here some years later, he has this deep rooted religion, this fear, um, deep in his mind that's keeping him away from people that God is not called unholy. And I love that phrase in there. He says to them,
Yeah, dude, it's my
he,
favorite
he, sh-
part.
he showed me that God shows no partiality, and I need to stop calling things unholy. And it's funny, the ESV changes it to common and unclean,
Yep.
which is convenient,
Very convenient. Some of these
because
Bible translators.
he's literally talking about people. He's teaching me not to call anything or anyone unholy.
Yeah.
And how do we normally start off our gospel? There's a God who's holy, you're not, and you're separated from him. Your sin has
Oh, dude.
separated you, right?
Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about a freaking like turn on the light moment for me, man, especially going to Bible college and seminary and pastoring and the first church I planted being in North Carolina, right next to Billy Graham Highway. No lie, that's the name of it. I mean, you're right. I mean, when I started digging into a lot of what we're talking about and learning this over the years and finding out that the theologian Karl Barth, when in his only trip to America back in the day, he spoke at the University of Chicago, and they were talking to him about the popularity of Billy Graham at the time in the Crusades and asking him why he has such a why he dismisses that and has such an issue with it. And he starts to unpack a lot of human nature and popularity, seems to be pretty synonymous with religious synthetics, and you can keep going down the list. But ultimately, he says, my beef with Graham is very simple, Karl Barth said. He begins with fear.
Hmm.
He begins with you're separated, God's distant. But here's this solution if you fill in the blank. He said, and last I checked, through the entire life and message of Jesus, he does not begin with fear. He begins with love. He begins not with he's distant and you're unholy, as you just read right there in Acts 10. He's actually present instead call nothing unholy.
Yeah.
Because Colossians 1 said, this Jesus who showed up, already past tense, reconciled everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And dude,
Yeah, and
to
faith is the
read that,
discovery of that.
the
Faith is
mind,
the
right, comes in, the
discovery of
fear.
that.
Yeah.
It's the embracing of what already is, of what already is true, not the, the thing that makes it true.
Yes.
Doesn't make it true.
Yep. Yeah,
You
he's not
can't make
dismissing the
yourself
role of
forgiven
faith.
and reconciled more than you can make Jesus Lord. Like, he is Lord of all.
Yeah.
Because he made everyone and reconciled everyone and overcame the grave. So he's Lord of all. Well, this Lord of all, right, has already made his mind up about humanity. You are reconciled, rooted in something I did in history. Your opinion of this has no barring on it at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it true or untrue. It's just an opinion. It doesn't change the fact that I walked out of a tomb. So faith is the discovery of what is, not the final like key that makes it true.
Yep. Discovery of what is that allows you to enjoy what is.
Yep.
And it's vital. I get that. We're not dismissing that in any way. Neither is Bart. But the grace we're talking about, yeah. 2 Timothy, that was given before the beginning of time. The God who will love you, no, God is love. It's his nature.
Yeah.
Bro, this is the best damn news this world's ever going to hear, man.
And so Peter shows up and he shares this
On a trip of ecstasy.
On an ecstasy trip. And he testifies to the Jesus who overcame the grave, who was raised. Peter says, I ate with him. I saw him. I touched him. And that shows no partiality, but his forgiveness is for all. And dude, literally the Holy Spirit shows up into Cornelius's house, dude, and like everyone believed and everyone got baptized.
Yeah. A whole house of delusional people were disillusioned by good news.
Yeah.
And awakened to a reality that's always been there.
So good, man.
So that's it, man. We have to, I think, move beyond the mind to also think with our hearts so we can cross the thresholds into what the Spirit is doing. And gratefulness from those who have loved us can live alongside of the restlessness that we feel because that framework didn't lead to what the Spirit's doing. And so let's rejoice in that. Let's have some courage in that. Let's see where this thing goes, man, in your life. All of you who are listening to this, see where it takes you. The new friends that you can form, the passing on of good news, the life change, the relief that you'll see, or maybe not see, but you're going to enjoy this presence of the Spirit as you get to just love with no strings attached, man.
Yep. And to really find the freedom in that it's not something you're doing. Peter didn't do this. Peter didn't even make this happen. It wasn't something that he was orchestrating. He literally and reluctantly stepped into something Jesus was doing in other people's lives.
Tripped into it.
Yeah.
Like straight up, dude. Like tripped into what someone else was doing.
Was shoved, kicked in the pants.
Yeah. Seems to be how it happens, right? So cheers to the unknown, man. Spontaneous adventure of faith. The going on a lark. Because the gospel, as it turns out, it's all a lark.
Yep.
And to that, cheers, friends.